Now make sure you hit that like button, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and also be sure to click on the description and sign up for the email list. You know, there are videos that we try and post on YouTube that for whatever reason, they don't post them. You don't want to miss them. So click the description and sign up for our email list. Now, Minneapolis, with the approval of the teachers union, has a new policy. When they have layoffs, they're not going to lay off by seniority. They're not going to lay off by who's the least competent. They're going to make sure that white teachers are laid off first. Why? Well, to overcome historical discrimination. Can you imagine if they applied something like this to, I don't know, airline pilots? There's a downsizing. We're not going to get rid of the worst pilots. We're going to keep them as long as they're people of color. We're going to get rid of the white pilots. Watch this interview with these two Minneapolis educators.
And joining us now for this GMA3 exclusive is the president of the MFT, Greta Callahan, and Vice President Marcia Howard. They both join me from Minneapolis. Welcome. We appreciate your time here. And I'm going to start with you, Greta, because this change it was taking away the departure from the traditional last in, first off layoff policy. That was what was in place. Now,
the old policy was to keep the more experienced teachers when there's a downsize and get rid of the least experienced teachers. Seems kind of rational, doesn't it?
Minnesota Public Schools defending the policy, the new change, saying in part to ABC News that this provision is, quote, to remedy the continuing effects of past discrimination.
The continuing effects of past discrimination. So in the past, the teachers union was racist. I presume it's not racist now, but it still has continuing, lingering effects. How?
Can you explain further why both the school district and the teachers union felt that this was an important and necessary change?
Well, our number one priority is what's best for students.
If your number one priority is what's best for students, why aren't you laying off the least competent teachers first, irrespective of their race? That's kind of what I'd be saying if I were conducting the interview, which is why I guess I'm not conducting the interview.
And what's best for students is having people in front of them who they can count on, who have the experiences and skills that they can also see themselves in.
That they can also see themselves in. So our number one priority is to make sure that the kids have competent teachers who know what they're doing, that they can see themselves in. That's a fancy way of saying black teachers should be standing in front of black students. Hispanic teachers should be standing in front of Hispanic students. Asian American teachers should be standing in front of Asian American students. What? What? Does that apply to sports teams? If your sports team is predominantly black, the coach should be black. And what does it have to do with learning, reading, writing, computing? This is just Orwellian. And notice the host doesn't have a problem with this. She's just, well,
and so our number one priority was to ensure that our students have safe and stable schools and receive the high quality education.
Is there any study that suggests a black kid does not learn well if the teacher who's competent is white? Is there a study that says that? And we talked about this before. Black kids have higher self-esteem than white kids, and much higher self-esteem than Asian American kids. So if the goal is to see somebody who looks like them so they can feel good about themselves, mission accomplished. They already feel good about themselves. However, the test scores, 85% black 8th graders nationwide are neither math nor reading proficient. They may have a teacher in front of them that they can see themselves in, though.
They deserve. So this contract language was something that we are, first of all, extremely proud of.
Extremely proud of it. We're proud of the fact that we're laying off competent teachers if they're white. We're proud of the fact that we're able to overcome historical discrimination. How are the test scores for these minority students? Any word on that? Are you going to ask that question? Is that going to come up?
For achieving, but it also doesn't go far enough. We need
doesn't go far enough
to support and retain our educators, especially those who are underrepresented.
We need to retain those of our educators, especially those who are underrepresented, because you have a study that shows if the teachers are white and the students are black, the black students can't learn, right? Where's that study? Well, the new GDP statistics are in, and they show that we are indeed in a recession. Whether the Biden administration calls it a recession or not, most Americans think our economy is heading the wrong way. We are in a recession. Inflation, a 40-year high right now. And if all your money is in the market or tied to the US dollar, you're messing with fire. Meanwhile, precious metals like gold are doing exactly what they should do.
So what do I do?
Hedge against inflation by visiting LarryForGold.com and get your free information kit on how to diversify and protect your savings with precious metals from Birch Gold Group. They've got an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, countless 5-star reviews, and thousands of satisfied customers. Gold is the right investment to make right now. Visit LarryForGold.com and get real help from Birch Gold today. Again, visit LarryForGold.com to claim your free, no-obligation information kit on how to protect your hard-earned savings with gold.
And this language does one tiny, minuscule step towards that, but doesn't solve the real crisis we're in right now.
It doesn't solve the real crisis we're in right now. And the real crisis we're in right now is we don't have enough teachers of color so that students can see themselves. That's why the test scores are so bad. That's why in California, 75% of black third graders are not reading proficient because they can't see themselves in the teachers that are in front of them, right?
And Marcia, this clause was created back in March after a 2-week teacher strike, and a lot of different things were.
A
3-week teachers strike, and so much was discovered and also determined because of that. But
is she going to ask, do you have any evidence whatsoever that a kid can't learn if the teacher in front of him or her is not the same race as a student? Do you have any study on that?
to that point, this was all written and agreed upon essentially 5 months ago. Why is this clause just now being discovered? Any idea on the timing of why this is all coming out now?
Is that your question? Your question is why now? As opposed to why? As opposed to you smoking something? I didn't have a black teacher until I was in the 7th grade. Actually, it turned out I had a black teacher. Her name was Mrs. Monroe. Later on, when I graduated, someone told me that she was black. I didn't know that. I went to an elementary school called 10th Street School first, and then one called 74th Street School. All my teachers, except for Mrs. Monroe, assuming she was black, I found that out later on, all my teachers were white. Yet I was able to read, write, and compute well above grade level. Imagine how I would have done if they had been black, right?
I think the timing is very suspect. This is the language that...
Notice how happy they are. How proud they are. They don't realize how sick this is. I'd love her to ask this black woman, when you were in school, were all your teachers black? Did you feel that you didn't get a good education because you had white teachers? Do you feel you would have had a better education had your teachers all been black? Ask her something like that.
We were put in, that we went out and marched for. We voted on this. The district and the union agreed upon this, and now it's coming out because some Minnesotan website decided to put it out there, and the MAGA media picked it up. And
so now she's upset that people are criticizing this. We voted on this. We had this plan in place for a long time. It was going to go off, and now because somebody MAGA doesn't like it, why aren't you concerned about whether or not there is a relationship between the race of the teacher and how well the students learn? That hasn't even come up in this conversation.
They were waiting for mainstream media to run with this story. It's a non-story.
It's a non-story that you are laying off white teachers because they're white, not because they're not competent. It's a non-story that you are implying that kids cannot learn unless the teacher is somebody they can see themselves in. So should only males have male teachers? Only females have female teachers? Does it work that way too?
It was language about the event of a layoff, and we are nowhere near having layoffs this year. We're down like 250 teachers.
So the point is, this policy only comes into play when we're laying off people. We're not going to lay off any people. So why are we talking about this? We're talking about this because it is blatantly racist. I am sure it is a violation of the Constitution, something called the 14th Amendment, equal protection. That's why we're talking about it. This is nuts.
We're down. There are no layoffs.
Now,
so I ask y'all why.
Yeah, no, we have
Why
been
is this
reporting
a
on and
story?
talking about a teacher shortage. So, that is.
So because there's no layoffs right now, and because this racist policy is not going to be implemented, we ought not be talking about it, right?
There's obviously not any concern right now in these times coming out of this pandemic. And I want to follow up, Greta, because you mentioned the discrepancy.
Let's move on then. Let's not talk about how utterly insulting this is. Are you telling me if I am a teacher and I am white, I'm not capable of teaching math or history or reading to a black student because that black student will not see me as somebody that he or she can see themselves in? How insulting is that to teachers?
And representation, the numbers are undeniable. The school district reports 65% of students in the past year are people of color, while just 30% of the teaching staff are people of color. So obviously the intent is to reconcile those numbers, but
to reconcile those numbers. So 60% of the students are people of color, and therefore 60% of the teachers should be people of color? What?
critics are saying it's discrimination, it's unconstitutional. Are you concerned? This doesn't go in effect until spring of 2023. How concerned are you that litigation may undo what you all have decided?
Finally, she asked a question she should have asked in the first place. Isn't this illegal?
Our concern is what's best for students. And
our concern is what's best for students. And what's best for students is for students of color to have teachers of color in front of them, even though we have no study suggesting that. And by the way, we don't really care whether or not this thing is illegal.
right now, we have kids who are sitting in lunchrooms being supervised because they don't have enough teachers in front of them to teach them. Our concern is about what's best for them, and that's why we went on strike for recruitment and retention of educators who represent our students and
educators who represent their students. How many of you watching me who are people of color remember the 2 or 3 or 4 outstanding teachers you had? Were they necessarily teachers of color? Do you recall any outstanding white teacher you had? Did you feel you couldn't learn from that white teacher even though that teacher was outstanding? One of my most memorable teachers taught government. His name was Katzman. Jewish. It never occurred to me that he couldn't teach me government because he was Jewish. Isn't this offensive? Whatever happened to what MLK said about content of character, not color of skin? The left does not want a colorblind society. They want a color coordinated society as long as they're the ones doing the coordinating. This is offensive.
smaller class sizes and more mental health supports and higher pay, because those are the things that are going to ensure that our students have the education that they deserve. And right now, they are not receiving that. So,
higher pay. Do you know that teachers in private schools and parochial schools make less money than the teachers in the government schools? But this woman implies that there's a relationship between higher pay and the quality of education a kid gets. And again, this questioner, this host, never asked that question.
no, that is not one of my concerns at all whatsoever, and we welcome any challenge to it.
All right. I mean, that was a very...
I don't care. We welcome any challenge to it. Not my concern whatsoever. Firing, laying off white teachers in favor of teachers of color who may be less competent, may have less experience. That's not my concern at all. I don't really care.
Very strong statement, Marcia. You're a teacher, you're an educator. What do you say to the critics who say this treats those long-time, more senior teachers unfairly?
About time we got to that question. And your answer is?
I've been teaching for about 24 years, and I started in a school that was over 60% black, and for many of my students, I am the only educator that they had in 12 years that looked like me.
And therefore, those kids prior to you coming in there got a substandard education. So what you're saying to all these teachers who taught all these kids before you became a teacher, they were getting a substandard education because those teachers were the wrong color. What kind of message is that to send to kids?
And here it is, 24 years later, and that's still the same case in a lot of schools.
And the reason our kids nationwide are not learning, kids of color, is because they don't have enough teachers who look like them. Wow.
This is a non-issue. It really, really is.
Well, if you say it's a non-issue, then I guess it really, really is a non-issue. Who am I to suggest it's a big issue? It is racist. It is an assault on merit. It implies that only black teachers should be teaching black kids. Only Asian American teachers should be teaching Asian American kids. And if not, your kid is getting a substandard education. Unbelievable.
But the part that is the issue is that our students deserve to have intellectualism and academia be.
Well, you just now said you're getting rid of white teachers no matter how intellectual they are, no matter how competent they are. Didn't you just say that?
Represented by people that are underrepresented, African Americans, indigenous folks, people of color.
Represented by people who are underrepresented.
They need to, and in order for us to get a foothold, we needed to put something in place to recruit and retain them. Because frankly, in this district...
And you see the white educator going like this, nodding? She just now said, you can't teach black kids. She just now insulted you. She just now said that because you don't look like the students in front of you, you ought not be teaching them. And she's just nodding, going along with it. Wow. I said this before. Whoever said compound interest was the greatest force in the universe never encountered white guilt.
They're not paying us enough. So if you have all the skills to be a teacher in Minneapolis, you would go somewhere else. They're not funding education in Minneapolis the way that they need to. And folks need to come off some money. Billionaires need to start giving what they're supposed to be giving to this state in order to fund education so that we can get some parity, so that we can actually attract people.
I can't take it anymore. We're spending more on education than ever before. There are only two other countries, industrialized countries in the world. One of them is Luxembourg. I think Switzerland's the other one. That spends more money than we spend K through 12 in America. And look at our results. And what's the answer? More money. What you've just now done is you've told competent white teachers in Minneapolis, go somewhere else. Take your skills somewhere else. We're having already a crisis in education. Many of our kids have lost a whole year of education because of COVID shutdowns. And the black and brown kids were already behind. Now they're behind another year. And what are you doing? You're laying off competent white teachers because they don't look like the black students they're in front of? This is ill. This is sick. And this interviewer didn't ask any of the difficult questions she should have asked. I ask you, why? UC Berkeley student housing co-op bans white people from common areas. There is a 30-room, quote, person of color theme house. How did I manage to survive in college without a person of color theme house? And apparently the policy is that if you are white, you're not allowed in common spaces. Now, this is not run by UC Berkeley. It's not a facility run by UC Berkeley. It's run by students. Quote, as this involves an off-campus, non-affiliated landlord, the campus has no ability under the Code of Student Conduct to discipline the landlord, end of quote. But the premise here is this. This is an area where white students are not allowed. And it doesn't matter the white student's ideology. What if the white student is an Obama supporter? What if the white student is a supporter of Black Lives Matter, as opposed to a Trumper? What if the white student is not guilty of Trumpism? It doesn't matter. If you are white, we don't want you. Can you imagine if there was a facility where blacks were not allowed to be in common areas? Can you say, get out the pitchforks? Wow. Hope you enjoyed that video. The full show is available to watch right now on Epoch TV. Just click the link in the description below to learn more, because we've got a country to save.